This is Genesis 28:10 through 17. Jacob left Beersheba and went toward Haran. And he came to a certain place and stayed there the night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of the place, he put it under his head and lay down in that place to sleep. And he dreamed. And behold, there was a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. And behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie, I will give to you and to your offspring. Your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south, and in you and your offspring shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Behold, I am with you and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land. For I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised. Then Jacob woke from his sleep and said, Surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid and said, How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. Thanks be to God. This is the word of the Lord.
Thank you, Betsy. You can hear me, right? Yep. All right. Happy Palm Sunday, everyone. Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord, is what the people were shouting on Palm Sunday. And I just want to affirm that and say that not just out of tradition, but because I truly believe that God is working in our church and doing a lot of good things. For those that might not have been here, might not even realize it, I'm privileged to be the fifth different speaker in about 5 or 6 weeks. I can't remember. So, like, God is growing people, and God is growing men in this church to love His word and to want to teach His word. And maybe that unsettles you a little bit. You're like, oh man, all these different people, but recognize that we are speaking with one voice from one word, and so there's absolutely consistency there. And I'm so thankful, like I said, how God's working, not just the people in this church, but in my life. And for those who don't know me, I'm Brian Hasbrook. I'm one of the pastor elders here. And, it's funny when we find ourselves at this point all of a sudden on a pulpit preaching, and the road to this place, to this stage, is not an easy one. It's not like we've had it all figured out our whole lives. I grew up in the church, but it's certainly not been the case for me. Each of us have stories about how God has met us and changed us. As a Christian, we all have these turning points in our life where God meets us and He becomes real to us. He's no longer just the gods of our parents. He becomes our God, and we're forever changed. For me, that time was back in 2010. Dayton, Ohio, and I just returned from Afghanistan for the third time. It was my return for my 7th deployment. Life was pretty rough. I had quite a few different scars. Somebody abandoned me, felt deceived. My life felt like it was in shambles. I actually moved from Minot, North Dakota to Dayton, Ohio. I didn't know anybody. I truly did not know anybody. The closest person I knew, like by name, was 300 miles away, my sister in Chicago. Right? I felt alone. I felt abandoned. Just wasn't sure where my life was heading, what was happening. but God met me there in the most tangible way. And today, as we go into Genesis 28, we see a turning point in Jacob's life as well. We see Jacob being met by God, having a vision. And Jacob, for those that haven't been here maybe the past couple weeks, he's running for his life. His brother Esau wants to kill him. He's actually taking pleasure in the fact that to kill his brother is how he consoles himself. And in this moment, Jacob is leaving his father, fleeing his brother. He doesn't know what is coming next for him in this moment. He's pretty much just trying to survive the night. As you read this morning, like I said, he's just unsure of his future. He's burdened by his past. But God is not distant. He comes down. He draws near to Jacob. And he speaks a promise. He says, I am with you. So with that in mind, I'm actually going to move this over here. We'll get into verse 1 of chapter 28, where we see God reaffirm the promise to Jacob before he ever leaves. Verse 1, then Isaac called Jacob and blessed him and directed him, you must not take a wife from the Canaanite women. Arise, go to Padan Aram, to the house of Bethuel, your mother's father, and take as your wife from there one of the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful and multiply you, that you may become a company of peoples. May he give the blessing of Abraham to you and to your offspring with you, that you may take possession of the land of your sojournings that God gave to Abraham. Thus Isaac sent Jacob away, and he went to Padan Aram, to Laban, the son of Bethuel the Aramean, the brother of Rebekah, Jacob's and Esau's mother. So here we have the promise being given a second time. This time Isaac gives the promise to Jacob willingly. He's not deceived. Jacob's not in front of him again, dressed like his brother with hairy hands and wearing his brother's clothes. No, Isaac bends to God's will, recognizes that truly the younger brother should serve the older brother, like Rebekah was told earlier. And now Jacob is told to find a wife from Abraham's family line back in their hometown, just as Isaac did. So if you remember back several chapters, unlike Abraham, who sent out his servant to go find a wife Unlike Abraham, who sent out his servant to find a wife for Isaac, he sent out a servant with 10 camels. He had choice gifts, is what the verses say. Isaac now sends out Jacob totally on his own. He doesn't have camels. He doesn't have choice gifts. Kind of wonder what those might be. But he's on his way. He's leaving his home, not as some spiritual champion, not with some grand sending, but rather fleeing with nothing but a blessing. What's striking here is that God does not stop to rebuke Jacob, right? God could rebuke Jacob and say, hey, you deceived your father when you got that blessing. You're doing it the wrong way. Instead, God allows Isaac to repeat the blessing to Jacob and reaffirm it to him. So the point here is that Jacob still does not deserve the blessing. Nothing has happened from the last chapter to now that makes it think like, oh, well, Jacob's a better son. No, he's still deceiving. He's still fleeing from his brother and doesn't deserve this blessing. Our sermon series has been titled Messy People, Gracious Blessing, and Future Hope. And here we see exactly that happening. God carries on his promise through Jacob, even though Jacob's life is messy. This is a gracious and blessing indeed, because once again, Jacob has done nothing to earn it. And finally, Jacob steps into the unknown with hope for the future. He has hope for the future because of the promise his father has given him. So Jacob departs with this blessing, but he's not necessarily departing in peace. He has a promise, but he's still afraid, and he leaves with the consequences of his actions. Jacob is running from his past and is uncertain about his future. God comes down and gives him hope. Maybe we all know that feeling. We've been in these spots where we know that what God says is true, but we're running from our past. We have anxiety about the future, especially in today's world. uncertain what future holds, that anxiety grips us, even there, God is faithful. Even there, God is already working, and even there, God is with you. Let's continue the story in verse 6. Now Esau saw that Isaac had blessed Jacob and sent him away to Padam Aram to take a wife from there. And that as he blessed him, he directed him, "You must not take a wife from the Canaanite women." And that Jacob had obeyed his father and his mother and had gone to Padam Aram. So when Esau saw that the Canaanite women did not please Isaac his father, Esau went to Ishmael and took as his wife, besides the wives he already has 2 wives at this point, Mahalath, the daughter of Ishmael, Abraham's son, the sister of Nebaioth. So right here we see Esau doing some damage control. He's going to take a 3rd wife, but this time he's not going to take a Canaanite wife like he has in the past. He's going to marry a woman from his uncle Ishmael's family. He's going to try to heed what his father Isaac has told Jacob to do. You see, now that he no longer has a blessing, it's kind of funny because he seems to now all of a sudden care about it. He sold his blessing for some stew, for some food, didn't necessarily care about it. But here, now that the blessing has been ripped from him, he's now starting to care, starting to act, starting to do the things his parents are asking of him. But here we see no change on the outside or on the inside. We just see him doing what his father wants. There's no prayer or sacrifice. There's no hint of repentance in these verses. This is the reaction. It's not a new heart. What Esau is doing is a new strategy. It's just a new strategy. If I do this, then maybe my father will grant me a blessing. If I marry not a Canaanite wife, maybe my father will bless me. If I do the right thing, maybe things will change. You see, Esau is trying to climb back into his father's blessings by doing the right thing. And if we're honest, Esau is not only a warning out there, but it's a warning in here for ourselves, right? The temptation to manage our appearances, to adjust our behavior, to call it repentance, but really all we're doing is changing our actions on the outside. We see that the blessing does not come from managing our choices. In this case, we will see that the blessing comes by God's grace alone. So here's Esau literally trying to climb his way back into his father's good graces, and Jacob has nothing to offer. He has nothing with him. He doesn't have the 10 camels. He simply has a blessing. One brother's hustling for approval. The other is hoping on a promise. Right here we see Genesis setting the stage to show us what we need to learn from this passage. You cannot climb your way into God's presence or his blessing. God comes down to us. Let's turn to verse 10. Jacob left Beersheba and went toward Haran. And he came to a certain place and stayed there that night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of the place, he put it under his head and lay down in that place to sleep. So verse 10 tells us that Jacob is heading in a northeast direction towards modern-day Syria. And we know from Genesis that if you're heading east, it's not a good thing, right, folks? It's not a good thing. In this case, he's obeying his father, but we recognize that east in Genesis, the direction of people that are fleeing consequences, they're fleeing God. It's away from the garden. It's away from what is right. It's away from the promised land, right? This is not good. Jacob must flee the promised land. Jacob is walking the same road. And so Jacob's journey to Haran, this walk he's on, is not just a walk, it's a kind of exile. We see him having to flee, and we recognize that just like Exodus, there's this wandering, this growth that must happen in Jacob's life. And if you look forward, spoiler alert, he's going to spend 20 years with his uncle Laban trying to find a wife, trying to actually get a wife. So this is a long road that he's going to be on. Jacob finds himself in the wilderness. Remember, Jacob usually likes to spend time in the tent with his mom. Esau is the one that's out hunting, the one that's like the man's man. I'm not going to do the Isaac impressions. He's so good at like doing Esau's like quotes. I was so glad as I was reading, I'm like, good, I don't have to like read Esau saying anything here. But we have Jacob the mother's boy who just wants to be in the tent making soup for dad, out here in the wilderness. The sun is setting. It's getting cold. He's tired. He's uncertain what the future holds. He's uncertain if he's going to be able to find Laban. This is a long road that he must be on. Will he be able to find a wife? There's this uncertainty lingering, as this is probably his first night out, where he ends up staying here. But this is exactly where Grace loves to meet us, and this is where Grace meets Jacob. When we are most helpless and tired of running, when we're at rock bottom. The stage is now set, and we do not want to miss what the text shows us next. Jacob does not find God by striving upward. God finds Jacob in his helplessness. God comes down. Verse 12, same verses that Betsy read to us. And he dreamed, and behold, there was a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to the heaven. And behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham, your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and to your offspring. Your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south. And you and your offspring shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Behold, I am with you and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land. For I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. So this is the third time Jacob is now getting this promise. The first time he's actually hearing directly from God. Just like Abraham and Isaac heard directly from God, God spoke to them. Jacob now has the opportunity to hear directly from God. This is no longer just a promise passed on from his fathers. It's one where God meets him and gives him the promise directly. Not only does Jacob get the promise of land, a nation, and a blessing, that once again, the same promise, land, nation, blessing, he also receives a promise that God will be with him wherever he goes. And this promise, he will bring you, Jacob, back to this land, back to the promised land. So here we see God saying, you will come back here one day. The other thing that's interesting about this is the ladder. It could actually be translated as staircase, and some translations have it as staircase. Another way to think about it is like a ziggurat. So the temples, the step temples, like the Tower of Babel, or maybe like a Mayan Aztec pyramid where you have these stepped temples going up, right? That also could be considered a ladder or a staircase. And I actually prefer that version simply because it talks about angels going up and down, ascending and descending. So there's this two-way traffic happening on this. So I think it's less than just a ladder like maybe we think about, but this staircase. And I think this is important because like we saw with the Tower of Babel, this analogy better reflects the way, this two-way traffic. So now contrast Jacob's ladder with the Tower of Babel that we see in Genesis 11. In Genesis 11, the Tower of Babel, man is working. Man says, let us build a tower with its top in the heavens. They are striving. They want to be known. Let us, for our glory, we're going to build this great city with this great tower that stretches to the heavens. We want to reach God. But here, Jacob is not working at all. He's literally asleep doing nothing. He's not praying. He's not fasting. He's not offering a sacrifice. He's not doing religious things. He's asleep. He's asleep. God's initiative is central to what's happening here. The ladder is set up. Jacob does not build it, and Jacob does not climb it. Some translations of verse 13 also read with a slight nuance, saying the Lord standing above it is how we read it in the ESV, but some versions say beside him. So the Lord is beside Jacob. And I kind of like the ambiguity there because like our omnipresent, ever-present God who is everywhere, he could be both. So I don't really know what he is in this translations right here, whether he was on the ladder or beside Jacob, but the point is clear that God is present. God is near to him. God is with him. So here we have Jacob on the ground, and God is near. It's funny because I think we call this story Jacob's ladder, but this is really God's ladder. God's done all the work. Jacob's done nothing to this point. He's not building it. He's not climbing it, like I said. God is not saying, try harder and maybe you'll reach me. God is saying, I've come to you. The ladder is not a picture of Jacob finally finding a way up to God. It's a picture of God making a way down to Jacob. And in our culture, we've all heard the analogy. Religion is like a mountain, right? We're just all trying to find our way to the top. And there's different ways up the mountain. You can have Islam, you could have Hindu, you can have whatever religion you want. It's all the same God at the top. And yet we read right here that that's not how our God works. Our God comes down. He doesn't make us strive up this mountain. He comes down to us, the bottom of the mountain. He does this because he knows we could never make it to the top. We can't make it. Turn to me, Psalm 24. We'll have it up on the screen. Psalm 24, verses 3 through 6. Who shall ascend the hill of the Lord? And who shall stand in his holy place? He who has clean hands and a pure heart, who does not lift up his soul to what is false and does not swear deceitfully. There's that word deceit, like Jacob's name. He will receive blessing from the Lord and righteousness from the God of his salvation. Such is the generation of those who seek him, who seek the face of the God of Jacob. Does Jacob have clean hands? Does Jacob have a pure heart? No. There's no way Jacob can make it to the top of that ladder. He cannot ascend the hill of the Lord. Once again, God comes down and meets Jacob. He gives him what he needs most. God doesn't give him a map, like, oh, here's how you get there. God doesn't give him a pep talk. Hey, this is going to be a long road. Don't worry, I'm with you. No, he gives him a promise. Behold, I am with you and will keep you wherever you go. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. You hear the repetition in God's own words. I am with you. I will keep you. I will not leave you. God does not just give directions, he gives himself. God makes it personal. He does not only say, I am Abraham's God and I am Isaac's God. He comes to Jacob. He speaks to Jacob. He binds himself to Jacob, promising he'll never leave him. In this wilderness moment, the faith that Jacob has heard about becomes Jacob's faith. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob now becomes the God of Jacob, the God that Jacob has just met. God comes down, reveals himself to Jacob, and God promises to stay close. So maybe you feel like you're right where Jacob is at this point. Night is closing in. You're sleeping on a rock. You're in a hard place. You've hit rock bottom. Maybe you feel alone right now. Maybe you're striving to climb back into God's grace. We've all had these moments as Christians where God meets us, where we feel lonely, and it's hard for us to see the light. Remember that God is with you. Remember that God is working. He has come down to you too, and God promises never to leave us either. It's only after grace is given to Jacob, as God comes near, that Jacob starts to understand what is actually happening. And we read about that in the next verse, verse 16. Then Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. Jacob awakes to this reality that's existed before he even realizes it. See, God was always in this place, even though he didn't know it. Even though he didn't know it, surely God was there. See, God's nearness is not dependent on Jacob's initiative or his awareness. And just like for us, we often miss how God is working the miracles around us. And yet the Lord is greatly present on his own terms, in his own way, among his people. So Jacob recognizes that God is there. He recognized that the Lord's place, he names the place Bethel, the house of the Lord. He says, and he responds with reverent awe as well. There's this awesomeness. How awesome is this place? He's seeing God in all his holiness, and he responds in the right way with awesomeness and reverence. And not only that, but fear. And he was afraid, and he said, how awesome is this place? The proper response to seeing a holy and perfect God is fear. Not fear that runs or is scared, but a fear that recognizes with humility the holiness of God. Now, it's funny because here in the Tower of Babel, people are trying to get up to God. People are working their way up to God. They want a tower to reach to heaven. And I was laughing because I was reading The Gateway to Heaven. It's almost like this Stargate. And I'm not a Stargate guy, but people want, like, even on our current mythologies, even our current stories, our movies, we want access to this other dimension. We want access to God. We want to reach him. We're all striving to be there. And yet, if we were to see him face to face, we would tremble in fear. Tremble in fear. He's a holy and perfect God. So Jacob has a proper response. He recognizes the awesomeness of God, and man, it's hard to miss. Let's continue reading with me in verse 18. So early in the morning, Jacob took the stone that he put under his head and set it up for a pillar and poured oil on top of it. He called the name of that place Bethel, but the name of the city was Luz at the first. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, if God will be with me and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God. And this stone which I have set up for a pillar shall be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will give a full tenth to you. Jacob's response reveals both progress but a lack of belief. There's certainly progress there with regards to recognizing who God is, wanting to give a tenth of everything he has. At this point, he has nothing. So giving a tenth is pretty easy. But that's a proper response as we see in the Bible. But we see a lack of belief. If God will be with me, and if God will keep me in this way that I go, and if God will give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God. If God does this, then I'll do that. But there's also something beautiful here, because Jacob is moving from a secondhand faith to a personal faith, like we talked about previously. He's not saying my father's God, like we read in the previous chapter when Jacob was talking to Isaac, your God. It's now my God. We're seeing some personal reflection, personal claiming of my God there. But there's still sanctification to take place. Like I said, so conditional. So conditional is Jacob's response. So the God of Abraham and Isaac has become the God of Jacob, which is great, but they're still learning. He still needs to learn to rest in God's unconditional promise. Jacob's faith is real, but his growth is not finished. He's still learning how to trust a promise that does not depend on him. That's so comforting. We don't see God pull back from Jacob and say, well, that vow is pretty selfish. It was, a lot of my's in there. It's not saying, well, you were conditional. Once again, we see God's patient grace. See his patient grace. He simply keeps the promise. God simply keeps the promise. So like Abraham and Isaac before, Jacob must learn to trust. Abraham got the promise, was told that he'd be a father of many nations, yet not long after ends up taking his slave and having a son through her. He failed to believe that God would do it, and he felt like he had to do it. But God grew Abraham, and here we'll see God has met Jacob and will start to sanctify Jacob and grow Jacob in his faith. It's so similar to how God grows his children, grows our faith, right? It's over time, it's step by step, it's through 1,000 moments of steady faithfulness. God grows us. And we will see that in the chapters as the story shifts from Isaac to Jacob. Today's Palm Sunday, like we said, the beginning of Holy Week. It's a time where we remember that God not only came down to be with us, Emmanuel, God with us, he came down to make a way for us to enter into his presence as well. Not just coming to us, but a way for us to go to him, to be with him in heaven by dying for us. Jesus himself speaks about Jacob's ladder in John 1. We'll turn there. John chapter 1. I'm just going to read verse 51. At this point, Jesus is speaking to Nathanael. Philip had brought him and said, Nathanael, you got to come meet the Christ. Like, we found the Messiah. And in John 1, 51, Jesus says this. And he, Jesus, said to him, Nathanael, truly, truly, I say to you, you will see heaven opened and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man. So who's the Son of Man? Jesus. And there's the big reveal. Jesus says he was the ladder in Jacob's vision. Jesus is the Son of Man. Angels are ascending and descending on the Son of Man. Angels are ascending and descending on the ladder. The Son of Man is the ladder. Jesus is the ladder. And it makes sense, right? It makes sense. How else does God, a holy God, a perfect God in heaven, come down and touch earth, be present, humbling himself to be with us? Jesus. This ladder that stretches all the way to heaven, all the way down to earth. This is what we call a theophany. It's a pre-incarnate appearance of Christ. You see, the God of the New Testament is also the God of the Old Testament. He's the same, always and forever. The same God who we celebrate on Palm Sunday, who we recognize as King coming to save us, is the God, Jesus, who appeared before Jacob there on the road. So the Son of Man was already there, standing near the sleeping Jacob, speaking promise to an undeserving deceiver. The seed of Adam, then Abraham, then Isaac, now Jacob, would one day crush the ultimate deceiver, Satan. And we see that in Jesus coming. If Genesis 28 teaches us that we cannot climb our way back to God, then the only hope is that God would come down to us and make a way. And he does in Jesus. He did. But not only does Jesus say he's Jacob's ladder in John 1, he is also the house and the gates. In Genesis 18:17, Jacob says, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. Well, we read in John chapter 2, verses 19 and 21, Jesus answered them, this is the Pharisees, destroy this temple, aka the house of God, and in 3 days I will raise it up. But he was speaking about the temple of his body. And then in John chapter 10, verses 7 and 9, so Jesus again said to them, truly, truly, I say to you, I am the door, or some translations, the gate of the sheep. Moving ahead to verse 9, I am the door, the gate. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved. So here, Jacob responds in awe. He's like, this is the house of the Lord. This is the gateway to heaven. And here we see Jesus saying, I am the house of the Lord. I am the gate. I am the way. Once again, the same God of the New Testament is the same God of the Old Testament. The house of God is not a place. It's not a place. Some commenters were talking about how Jacob might have overemphasized Bethel and the place and putting up the pillar and putting the oil on the stone, recognizing the place when God says, I will be with you. And he's traveling, like I'm always going to be with you. And here we recognize that the house of God is not a place. It's Jesus. And I'm so thankful that we have a religion that doesn't require us to go to a place. I was looking up some stats, and last year, 1.6 million Muslims traveled to Mecca for the Hajj. That is one of the 5 pillars of their faith. If you are a faithful, God-fearing Muslim, it's weird, it's kind of iffy. You must travel to Mecca once in your life. But if you're poor, you can't, well, it's okay, but you better. So I don't know, I'm not really sure where that bar is, but for Muslims, once again, 1.6 million of them just last year traveled to Mecca. It's part of their faith. You have to go to this place to worship this God. You have to do this thing. Last year also, 660 million Hindus traveled to the banks of the Ganges to bathe and purify themselves. 660 million people every 4 years, they travel to the Ganges, the holy river, to bathe themselves and purify. Go here, do this. Go here, do this. Climb this mountain. It's your ladder, you got to climb it. And that ladder is only right here. No, we have the house of God with us, Jesus with us wherever we go. We don't need to go to a place. God doesn't ask us to climb the mountain and do something. He comes down in the person of Jesus and he does it all for us. Not only that, but Jesus is also the very fulfillment of Jacob's vow to God that we see in Genesis 28. Jacob's response is imperfect and self-centered and conditional, like we already talked about. But like we've also talked about in previous sermons, and Isaac preached on this, God turns all things for good, turns evil for good, right? So Genesis 18:20, Isaac gives this imperfect vow. If God will be with me and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, well, who is the way? Who is the bread? Who clothes us with righteousness? Got the verses there in John 14:6. Jesus said to him, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. John 6:35. Jesus said to them, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me shall not hunger, and whoever believes in me shall never thirst. And Isaiah 61:10, prophesying of Jesus, for he has clothed me with the garments of salvation. He has covered me with a robe of righteousness. God, Jesus, fulfills Jacob's vow from thousands of years earlier in the person of Jesus. So what ladder are you tired of climbing? What are you turning into a religion, something you feel like you have to do for God, do for others? Christianity is not a list of steps to climb. It is not a do better and God will come to you. The gospel is good news. God has come down. Jesus is the way. God is drawn near to us and provides for us. God gives us his righteousness, and God will not leave us until he has done what he promises to us. I want to make one more connection to Palm Sunday. It's kind of fun. I was just reading this morning in Luke about the triumphal entry, and we see Nathanael calling Jesus the King of Israel, and that's what the people were crying out, just like we talked about and had in the response this morning that Matthew led us in. Jesus is the King. Jesus has the triumphal entry into Jerusalem, and in Luke chapter 19, verse 38, the people are saying, blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord. Like I said, that's what they're shouting. And when the Pharisees heard this, they said to Jesus, teacher, rebuke your disciples. And this is how Jesus answers them. I tell you, if these were silent, the very stones would cry out. I couldn't help but think that here, Jacob falls asleep on a stone. And when he sees God, he cries out in worship and awe to who God is. And here, the people are crying out, Jesus, you're the King, you're the King. And if they hadn't cried out, Jesus says that the stones would cry out. So if Jacob hadn't responded in worship, maybe the stone he was sleeping on would have. I don't know. But it's just cool to see, once again, just the ties, the story that God is unfolding through the patriarchs all the way through Jesus coming and through today. So in Genesis 28, we see Jacob running. We see Jacob empty-handed. He has nothing to offer. He's not working. He's literally lying asleep on the ground, and God comes down. God draws near. God speaks promises. Jacob has his Bethel moment. I have my Dayton, Ohio moment. What's the moment in your life where you trusted God, where you recognize that God is not just the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, or the God of Brian, that's the God of fill in your name. He becomes my God, personal and present for you. Pray that hearing about Jesus isn't just something that's your parents' God, or is something that you just kind of hear about. It's great if you're interested and curious and want to know more. That's fantastic. But at the same time, at some point, God needs to become your God. And realize that just like Jacob, who's imperfect, his name is literally a deceiver. He's fleeing. He doesn't know what the future holds for him. That God comes and meets him. And God wants to come and meet you too if you do not have a personal relationship with God. You don't have to have it all figured out. Jesus meets us right here, right there at rock bottom. God comes down and meets us at the bottom of the ladder. Let's pray. God, thank you for being a God that meets us where we are. It meets us in our sin. Totally imperfect, totally undeserving of any blessing and any promise. Yet while we were still sinners, you came and died for us. As we reflect on this Holy Week, as we go out this week, may we be in awe of how you are so close and with us, even though we might not always recognize it. God, we ask you to continue sanctifying us, improve our faith, increase our faith, Lord. Forgive us for not fully believing in the promise that we have in you, the promises that you have for us to save us and to come again. God, these promises are sure. I pray that we would trust in them as we go out here from here today. I pray this all in Jesus' name. Amen.